Sikha will be in look at the Sikhes Chelik Tasvov, the third Sikha to Parsha Toldos. The Sikha is going to talk about the Psukim. So I'm just going to mention some of the Psukim from before. Torah says that Esau, when he was 40 years old, he married two wives, Yehudis Bas Be'eri and Bosmas Bas El Nachiti. The Pasuk says further, Vatiana made us Ruach Yitzchak Rivka. They were, I don't even know how to translate that, bitter spirit. I mean, they were annoying, so to speak, to Yitzchak and to Rivka. Then the Pasuk continues. Vahiken and Yitzchak got old, Vatichenu Ein of Mereis, and his eyes became weak from seeing, he couldn't see. So he called Esau, and he told him that, I don't know when I'm going to die, so I want to give you a bracha, so please go bring me food, and I'll give you a bracha. The Peil Mamish, what happened was, instead of Esau, Yaakov came first, and he got the bracha. And the reason why Yitzchak didn't recognize that it was not Esau, but Yaakov, was because that's why the Torah gave this introduction, that he was not able to see. So therefore, he didn't know. This is the Seder of the Psukim. So we're going to start the Sikh inside. If Posik Vahik is and Yitzchak Vatichen Ein of Mereis, the Posik says that Yitzchak was old and his eyes became weak from seeing. Zogt Rasha drei Pirusha was is given the Sibbe was gebracht zu Vaticheno. Rasha gives three interpretations, three reasons, three Pirushim why his eyes were weak, why he couldn't see. Number one, he says, Ba'oshno Shalelu, with the smoke of these wives, according to some Girsa, we have these words, that they brought Ketores to Avodah Zorah, and it makes smoke, and smoke bothers your eyes. So the smoke of these wives, that made him hard to see. Swam Pshat. Dobar Achar, another Pshat, when he was put on the Mizbeach for the Akedah, while Yehoviv Reitzul Shochte, and his father wanted to shecht him. But at that time, the Shemayim opened up, the heavens opened up, the Malachim saw what's happening, that Yitzchak is going to be geschochten, while Yebeichim. The Malachim cried. The Yordu did Misayim, so their tears fell, but no Fa'aleinu. And they fell onto his eyes, into his eyes. Therefore his eyes became weak. Dovar Achad. The third pshat is different reason. It happened right before the brachas were given, and David wanted that Esau shouldn't get it, but Yaakov should get it. So if Yitzchak would be able to see, he would know that it's Yaakov, so he wouldn't give him the brachas. So the Eibishter made him that he shouldn't be able to see well, and B'meile, Yaakov was able to get the brachas. That's the third pshat. He's in them nicht verstandig. Rebbe says this whole thing is not understood. Number one, in Pashtas Kumtuis, simple pshat, if you look at the psukim, it comes out, at the posik gufa hidem tam. The posik itself gives the reason why he was hard of seeing. In the Verte was the words right before Vatichenu Eino, that his eyes became weak from seeing, the posik gives an introduction, tells you why it was. The posik starts off by saying, Vahik Izok and Yitzchak. When Yitzchak got old, when Alsteit saw their phone, Vatichenu Eino of Mereis. So as a result of old age, he stopped seeing so well. Al derech shteit by Yaakov Avinu, like it says by Yaakov later on in Vaychi, it says Ve'eni Yisrael kovnu mezeiken, that the eyes of Yisrael of Yaakov was heavy from seeing, and it says there a reason because he was old, mezeiken from old. So l'chura, this is the same thing here. It says in Posik he became old, and therefore it was hard of seeing. As we see physically, as if they're elder, when you get older, the ability to see becomes weaker. So the Rebbe says, since the Posuk itself gives the reason why his eyes became weak, so there was that Rasha suchen andere time, and why does Rasha have to look for other reasons? That's one question. Another question. Rasha gave three reasons. The question is, Rasha brings zwei oder mehr Pirushim, wherever Rasha brings two or more Pshatim, he says, allemal zu lieb dem, was jeder von sie hat, und sich etwas a Schwierigkeit, was ist in der zweiten Pirush. It's always because each one of the Pirushim has something that's not so clear, that because of that, you have to give another Pirush. And after, let's say the first Pshat has a Schwierigkeit, has some hardship, they give the second Pshat. But if the second Pshat is completely good, then you wouldn't need the first, because there's something in the second Pshat also not understood. The same thing is with the three Pirushim. Obviously, there's something not understood according to both, and you need the third. That's one thing. The Seder Pirushim is in Rashi, the order of, when he gives more than one Pirush, the order is also bediuk. The Schwierigkeit from zweiten Pirush is Gresha from ersten Pirush. The hardship on the second Pshat is worse, means stronger than the hardship on the first Pshat. That's why the first shot is a better shot. That comes first, then comes the second. I say the dritter pirush, gab it zweiten pirush. Same thing if you have three pirushim. So the third pirush is like the least of all. In other words, the hardship on the third pirush is stronger than the hardship on the second, and certainly on the first. Davon verstehen, so we have to understand, welche Schwierigkeiten sei voran die drei Pirushim von unser Pirush Rashi. What hardship is there in the three different Pirushim that Rashi gives here? Und mit was ist der zweite Pirush mehr kosher von ersten? And how is the second pshat harder, has more hardships than the first? Und der dritte von der Friedrich zwei, and the third one has more hardships, stronger hardships than the first two. What are they? It's the second question. Third question. The Gerät kam upon, as I said, spoke many times, that dort where Rashi schreibt drei Pirushim, that wherever Rashi writes three Pirushim, is uiser den Basunte Kasche in jeden einzelnen Pirush, was wird abgenommen durch die zwei andere Pirushim. Besides the fact that each one Pirush has a hardship that the other two Pirushim don't have, it takes away the hardship of the first, is voran a Schwierigkeit in jeder zwei von den drei Pirushim zusammen. There must be that there is a certain question that two of the three have. So the Belchus is neitig, the dritte Pirush, why we need the third Pirush. Was leitim and itodi kasha, according to the third shot, the kasha that we have on the other two is not there. How do we know that's how it is? For Leib, we wird sagen, als durch zwei Pirushim, gehen up alle kasha, as if we have two Pirushim. All the kashas go away, but the Rashi nicht darf non kommen zu dritten Pirush. Rashi wouldn't have to say a third Pirush. The fact that Rashi says a third Pirush means that there is something that's not understood in the other two. That means that there's something not understood in the second and the third, why we need the first. There's something not understood in the first and the second, that's why we need the third. No, I said the word wrong. There's something not understood in the first and the second, we need the third. There's something not understood in the first and the third, that's why we need the second. And there's something not understood in the second and the third, that's why we need the first. Because if it wouldn't be like it would be that there's nothing hard in both of the Pirushim, so why wouldn't two Pirushim be enough? Why do you need the third? So Davon in Pirush Rashi Shapanenu. So in the Rashi that we're talking about, we have to find eight the Kushim Meshutefes for jeder zwei Pirushim zusammen. We have to figure out what's not understood in each one of the two. Und wie sie wird verantwortet durch den dritten Pshat. And what's the answer? That the kasha is not there if you learn the third Pshat. So there must be something in the first and the second that's not understood, that the third one only has that. Something in the second and the third, something in the third and the first. That's why we need the second. But what is it in these Pirushim? The Rebbe continues. The canvas Rashi will it learn if you can only bepashtas. The reason why Rashi doesn't want to learn as it's assumed in simple pshat that his eyes became weak because he became old. As the Rebbe has a shiloh, that seems to be what the Torah is telling us. But Rashi obviously doesn't like it. Rashi feels that that's not the real reason. That's what Rashi finds other reasons. So the Rebbe says very simple why Rashi had to come on and not accept that it means push it because he was old. Why? In the Friedrich Seder, in the previous Seder, state by Vorach Alkimis Yitzchak, it says the Eibishter blessed Yitzchak. Teich that Rashi says, but the Eibishter blessed Yitzchak, because Nisyare Avram Levoras Yitzchak. Avram was afraid to bench Yitzchak because he saw that Esav will come out of himself from, even though Hashem had given Avram the ability to give all the bracha, but he was afraid to bless Yitzchak. Omar, and Avram said, Yovi Bala brachas v'yivora, let the owner of the brachas, the one that's the boss of all the brachas, let him give the brachas. Hashem came and benched Yitzchak. So Yitzchak had a special bracha from the Eibishter. Stellte the kasha, so there's a kasha. Wie kommt es? How is it possible? Was not, and with the Eibishter allein not gebenched Yitzchak Avinu, and after the Eibishter himself benched, blessed Yitzchak Avinu, so the später sein in der Matzav Matechenenu. So he should later be in a matzav of having trouble with his eyesight. Was Vashavda mentioned Tzar and Yisurim, it causes a person to have pain and it causes him to suffer. These Virasha Shrike right that not being able to see is not just a plain Tzar. Rasha says later in Pasha Vayetze, Amitzadem is a given kemes, we consider him almost like dead. So the fact that the Gemara says it is not enough because Rashi doesn't rely on the Gemara, because Rashi teaches somebody who is not learning yet the Gemara. But Rashi himself brings it, that a person who can't see is like a dead person. So you can imagine how bad it is. It's very simple. And since Hashem himself, the one that's the Baal of brachas, the owner of the brachas, the boss of the brachas, benched Yitzchak, so the fact, even though he came older, it shouldn't have caused this, shouldn't have affected him in a negative way. Bifratas in Yeni Jordan is 100 und 23 Jahren nicht given as a tiefer älter. Especially, how old was he? 123 years. Those years, it wasn't such a deep, so old. He wasn't even that so old. So it comes out as a so ganze 57 Jahre sein gemäß. He became, at this point, when he gave the bracha to Yaakov, till he passed away, was another 57 years. So for another 57 years, he was not seeing well, even though he had a bracha from the Eibishter, special bracha, so obviously he shouldn't have. Especially if we don't find by others. Von die alle Menschen, was ein Dämon besitzt, all the people who are mentioned till now, we don't find such a thing. Many of them were much older than 123 years. If naturally, if you become older in that age, you start have hardships in seeing, so other people should have to say, we don't find it. So there must be something in Yitzchak. When Yitzchak had a bracha from Hashem himself, the Rebbe sagt Rashi andere time of it. So Rashi gives other reasons why he was hard of seeing. That's main as bichlal, because generally, on bifrat, and especially we're going to see it here, it's at the bracha, but the Rebbe should give Yitzchak. As far as the bracha is concerned, that the Rebbe gave Yitzchak both events of sich nicht reingemischt, kein Seitig in Yonim, there wouldn't be side reasons mixed in, side in Yonim, but by him dan Taka given. A Taka would have been that way. He would have not affected his sight. Al deref Yibamesha Rabbeinu. Like Bamesha, it says, like Koasain, his eyes didn't become weaker. By Yitzchak also. Mitzad the bracha, he got a bracha, it would have not happened. Here there are side reasons for it. They got mixed in. And they caused his eyes to become weak. So that's number one. Before we go into what the reasons were, first, why we needed a reason. So the Rebbe explained why we need a reason, because what the Pasuk says, that he became old, is not a good enough reason. That to say because of that, it's hard for him to see. So we have to find other reasons. Now, since when we start learning the Pasuk, that his eyes became weak, he couldn't see, right away becomes hard to understand. Right away, when you learn the Pasuk, it says in Pasuk that his eyes were weak. It says that he became old, but obviously we understand that that's not the reason he became weak. It says it became weak for some reason. So we start thinking, what could be the reason? So the first thing that comes to your mind is, the answer of the Shaila is ongeteilt in the Psukim Gufe. That the answer to this question, if that's a simple question that comes up in the Pasuk, probably the Pasuk itself tells us the answer. What was the reason why his eyes became weak? We bald as them Pasuk, but ein of mereis. Kum behemtich zufrieden Pasuk. Since this Pasuk, that his eyes became weak from seeing, became darkened from seeing, comes right after a Pasuk before. What does it say in the Pasuk before? The Pasuk before was that it says right before that the wives of Esau were bad spirit, made feel bad, Yitzchak and Rivka. So the Dembas because they worship Avodah Zarah. Like Rasha says, is mistaber. So it makes sense. As in the smichas haksuvim is merumas the sibir futachena. That in the psukim, the way they go together, there's a hint why his eyes became weak. The Pasuk says that they were made as ruach. They caused them trouble and pain because they worship Avodah Zarah. And then it says he couldn't see so well, he couldn't see. So obviously it's connected. And the Rebbe tells Rasha the Pirish. So Rasha right away says the Pshat as the Vatechenres Yikum and Boshna Shalelu, that his eyes were weak because of the smoke of these wives. Like Samanfak al Pirish, that's the first Pshat. That's the first thing it says, that's the main Pshat. By that is Merum is durch the Psukim Gufe, because in the Psukim it seems to be saying so. But according to the other Pirushim, is the Sibir Vatechenres and Nitmerum is the Pashtas Aksuvim. The other ones, as we said, the other ones is because the Malachim's tears came down, or because Hashem did it so he should get the brachas. It's not hinted in the psukim. So right away we see why this is the first shot, and already we have an answer to part of one of the shailas. That the Rebbe said that you have three pirushim. There must be one question that, besides each one has its own question on it, hardship. There must be in each two a question that they both have. Here we see the question of the two, the hardships of the two, second and third, versus the first. That the second and two have a problem. You're going to say those pshatim, but they're not hinted in the pasuk. While the first one is, so that answers that question already. We still have to answer the other two. So we see why the first pshat is that it was because of the smoke of these wives who worship Avodah Zarah, and that comes first. And that's something that the other two can't answer, because this comes first because that's the remes in the posik, and the other two are no remes in the posik. In the Mershon Pirish, I know got zwei Schwierigkeiten, but we said the fact that Rashi gives a second and a third means that the first one also has a Schwierigkeit hardship. This was not a hardship, this was good, that it was become rumors in the Psukim, but there are other problems. Number one, he's moving at in the Shei Yisov of Nid Gewein zusammen mit Yitzchak. It's understood that the wives of Esav didn't live together with Yitzchak. So them got a bezunder dira, the dira they had their own apartment, their own place where they lived. Or maybe even each one had its own, more than one, but it wasn't in the house of Yitzchak. It's understood that they worshipped the Zorah and they made smoke by bringing ketores to the Avodah Zorah. They did it. They didn't, like they lived in another house and they didn't come to Yitzchak's house and worship Avodah Zorah there. So obviously they had probably their own homes and they did that over there. And if so, it's not so simple to say as Oshna Shalelu, the smoke that they made in their house. But Tashat Yitzchak Nizainu, so it affected Yitzchak in his house, it affected his eyesight. Not so posh. That's one question. That's another question. If it's the smoke that did it, why did it only harm Yitzchak and not Rivka? They were there together. So that's a hardship in the first shot. So even though the first shot is a better shot because it fits to the hemshech of the psukim, but still there's a shverek, and that's why Rashi feels that he has to bring other pshatim. Like always, when he has more than one shot, if there is something not understood in one shot, Rashi brings the second shot. Because of this problem and this first shot, Rashi has to come on to others. Now we have to see if the others have no problems, then that would have been the first shot. No, they have problems already. We know that it's not marumas in the posik, but still, why they are second and third? Because they have also problems. That's why they are not enough themselves. The besondere Schwierigkeit in jeder von the anderen zwei Perushim, the specific hardship in each one of the other two is number one. What are the other two? The second shot is that the Malachim cried and at Akedah, and their tears came into his eyes. And the next shot, so we have to find the hardship in each one of the pshatim. Besides the hardship that's in both equal, like we said before, that doesn't have a remes in the posik. That's a hardship in both of them together. But they have to have each one themselves also something that's hard to understand. So what's the hardship in each one of these two pshatim? So Rabbi explained. In Zweiten Pirush is kosher, and the second pshat is hard. The pshat that the Malachim cried and by the Akedah and their tears came into his eyes, because the teichen from them Pirush, the teichen, the concept, the contents of this pshat, that niftuch hashamayim, that the whole heaven opened up, the Malachim saw it, while you beg him and they cried, the Yordah the same, and their tears came down. The fichach kohen, that's why his eyes became weak. Is aninya from drash. That doesn't sound too much like pshat. That's drash, even though sometimes Rasha brings a drash. When does Rasha bring a drash? When you need to be, when the pshat is not good enough. So that forces a drash. So here, because there is a shverikite in the first shot, you have to bring now. So there's a drash, but still a drash is not so good. In other words, like a pshuta shemikro. The gamer nit up pshuta shemikro is completely not according to simple pshat. Darke shel Rasha b'pirusha teira. That's the derech of Rasha. So that's why there's a hardship in the second shot. If in dritten pirush, but noch aggressor at me. There's also a hardship on the third one. Even a bigger kashe. Wie kommt es, als der Eibishter so vertunkeln der Ehe von Yitzchaken und auf sehr viele Jahren? How could it be that the Eibishter will make his eyesight weak of Yitzchak? And for so many years, als a zweiter Yaakov soll durch dem bekommen die Broches. In order that Yaakov, who's the second person, should get the Broches. So the Eibishter made Yitzchak suffer for so many years, so someone else should gain. That's hard to say. Certainly there are many ways Hashem has. Or sicher der Rebbe got another Weg durch welchen Yankev so kriegen die Broches. And definitely Hashem would have another way how Yankev should get the Broches. We bald da dos ja sach as größere Schwierigkeit wie die Schwierigkeiten auf dem zweiten Pirush, Schwierigkeit auf dem zweiten Pirush. This is a stronger problem than the problem on the second Pirush. The problem on the second Pirush is that it's drash. Okay. It makes sense that this thing has a Schwierigkeit in understanding the concept. Hashem would do such a thing. But verschaffen Yisurim und Hepech HaTefer einem, the Tefer von der Zweiten, because to cause suffering and the opposite of good for one person, in order that a second person should gain from it, That looks like the opposite of righteousness, of being right. Impossible to say such a thing by the Eibishter. The Eibishter, one person suffers, someone else should gain. The Farshel Rasha then Pirish, noch und zweiten Pirish. That's why this is after the second. That's why it's third. So the first one has the Schwerigkeit that we said before. So you said the second. The second has a Schwerigkeit, and then you bring the broader third. But now we said before, we said before, hot jeder from the drei Pirushim, amayla klaba the andere zwei Pirushim. That each one of the three has something that both don't have. There's a hardship that is in two of the three. Like I said before, one and two have a hardship that the third doesn't have, but the one and two has to have a similar hardship. And two and three and one, whatever way we said before. In andere Werte, in other words, jeder zwei Pirushim haben dieselbe Schwierigkeit. If you take each two, there's one hardship that they both have, or they need glatt Schwierigkeit or something that's not so simple. Was ist nicht in dem dritten Pirush that the third one doesn't have. So number one and two has something that a question that the third doesn't have. Number two and three have. And then 3 and 1, and 3 and 2. So the Rebbe says like this: the Yisem Nikri was do in ersten Pirish gab the andere zwei bestimmt in them. The mile that the first one has, that the other two don't have, is wie gesagt früher. That's already said. We said before was Blazer is Merumas and Posik. That's the only one's Merumas and Posik, and the other two have one hardship that they both have. Besides the hardships in each one, they have one hardship, both together. Both are not Merumas and Posik, and that's the mile of the first. The Meile von zweiten Pirish gegen ersten und dritten. Now, what's the Meile of the second one? About this first and the third, we have to have a certain Schwerigkeit in the first and the third that the second doesn't have. So he says like this: like alle Perushim is vatichene given the Sibbe was a Gedung and Yitzchak soll the Broche Sibbe gem Janke. According to everybody, the reason why his eyes were weak was so that Yaakov should get the Broches. He said that's why it's an introduction. Because he wanted to give the brachas to Esav. Yaakov came, and he gave him the brachas. How come he gave him? How come he didn't see that it was Esav? That was Yaakov, not Esav, because his eyes were weak. So the Vatchen is all to tell us why Yaakov got the brachas. Aber in the ersten und dritten Pirish, but it's hard. According to the first and the third, his eyes got weak in connection to something that's embarrassing, something that's negative. What is it? Late Nershon Pirish, according to the first shot, that it came because of the smoke of Avodah Zarah from Esav's wives, Mitzadam Osham from Avodah Zarah. That's a negative thing. It came because of the Osham, because of the Avodah Zarah that they did, and they made smoke of Avodah Zarah. That's why he wasn't able to see. Or late in dritten Pirish, according to the third Pirish, Mitzadam was Yitzchak got gewollt bench Esav. What was the third? Yitzchak wanted to bench Esav. David, they didn't want it, so made him not see, and Yaakov should get a bracha. So it's also connected to something negative, that Yitzchak wanted to give the brachas to Esav, which is not such a good thing. The Meile Kum Tuis comes out, according to that, as an inyan from Gunus und Chisorn gebracht zu die brachas. So according to the first and the third, comes out that the reason Yaakov got the brachas is because there was something negative that happened. That they worship Avodah Zarah, the wives of Esav. That Yitzchak wanted to give the bracha to Esav, so Eibush had to make him not see, so he should be able to give the brachas to Yaakov. So that's a Schwerigkeit that this first and third shot had. According to the second shot, on the contrary, what made him not see so good? Because he was taken to Akedah, and that's a great thing. And because of that, he got his eyes because the Malachim cried. That's a good thing. So there we have a chasson in the first and the third, and the middle one doesn't have that. Now we have to figure out why there's a problem with the first two, and the third one doesn't have the problem. The third one has that mile. What is that? According to the first two, comes out. Comes out. According to the first one, it was when Esav got married. After Esav got married with his wives. According to the second one, it was by the Akedah. And the Rebbe teaches us, it's many years before this story of here, when he was 123 years and was going to give the brachas to Esav. When Esav married these wives, Al Zaydik Arboim Shon, as we said before, it was 40 years old, is Yitzchak dan Al given 100 years. Yitzchak was 100 years old. While when Esav is born, Yitzchak Al given 60 years. Yitzchak was 60 when Esav was born. So when Esav was 40, Yitzchak was 100. So it comes out that he was 100 years old when he started getting, I don't want to use the word blind. I didn't use the word blind. The Rebbe doesn't use the word blind because once by Fabringen, the Rebbe spoke that he saw Hanocha that was written, and we used on Yitzchak the word he was blind, and the Rebbe said, cuts me in my ears. I can't listen to such a thing. It's hard to see. He couldn't see, but to say he was blind. So I'm not using the word blind. But he was 100 years old, according to this, when he started getting hard to see. Like in Zweiten Pirish, it has gekommen mit Zeit Demois HaMalachim, that it came because of the tears of the Malachim. That happened by the Akedah. But passiert noch früher, it happened even before. Not when Yitzchak was 100. When Yitzchak is algebra 37 years, when Yitzchak was 37 years old, because when Yitzchak went to the Akedah, he was 37 years old. Stellt the Shailas, it's a Kasha, sign the first, sign the third. Sign the first and sign the second. Why does it say first that Yitzchak got old, and then it says his eyes became schwach, he became weak? That's not what happened. First, his eyes became weak. Like the erste zwei Perushim, hat gedacht stehen, if Aketten say that. According to the first two Pishotim, it should have the opposite say that. They can say that Amiro is exactly how it happened. First, he got hard to see, whether it was when he was 37 years old or when he was 100 years old. And then 23 years after being 100, which is many, many years after the Akedah, that's when he got old, if you call 123 years old, like he said, I don't know, I might die, etc. So why does it say Paket? It says first he got old, and then it says this. Len deri berasha adriten pirish. That's why Rashi, this is a Shverakaiten in the first and the second. So Rashi learns the third pirish. Kadei sheyitl Yaakov Sabrochas. They made them hard to see. Tuck it in order to give the brachas to Yaakov. But like them pirish is glad to say that Akosas that the pasuk tuck it makes sense. The order makes. Ahik Izok and Yitzchak. He got old. We call this 120 years old. Und so lieb dem hat gewollt geben die brachas says. Since he felt he's getting old, he wanted the bench chase. So is there far? But that's why his eyes became weak. Kadei Yaakov in the brachas. Not as Yaakov should make the brachas. So we see the need for the three pirushim. We see the shverakite in the spirits. We see the shverakite in the two. Each two will the third. And B'meile Rashi, so to speak, almost like saying you have no choice in order that certain things have a shverakite. So you have to be three pirushim. And the order of the three pirushim is also the shverakite, not the first one. In other words, the first one is the best shot because that fits mamish the psukim. The second shot is not as good, but better than the third, and then comes the third. That's the pshat Rashi. From the heroes, from the Bitten Pirush in Rashi, from the lessons that we could take from the third pshat in Rashi, what we could learn out from the third pshat, that what happened here, the Eibishter made Yitzchak not see so well in order for Yankov to take the brachas. So we see from here, how far you have to be careful not to speak Lashon Hara. Because we see in L'chura, the day as Yankov is on them and the brachas, in order that Yankov should take the brachas, but the Rebbe had a posh dates, the Rebbe had a very simple answer. What he did was to make Yankov the bracha, he made him not see. That's a simple answer. So Magalos Yitzchak, Mazaisev is Arosha. Why couldn't he just tell Yitzchak, Yitzchak is Arosha, don't give him the brachas? But Mele, but they give him the bracha to Yankov, and he will give the bracha to Yankov. Befrat, certainly, especially as wegen Esav's früher, that Yitzchak gewusst has in Avodah Zarah. Especially, he knew that they're worshiping Avodah Zarah. The pasuk says, not after because it says he got hard of seeing because of the smoke. The pasuk, but he made us ruach Yitzchak and Rivka. It says clearly that it was annoying to Yitzchak and Rivka. So why? The fact that Rashi says that they worship Avodah Zarah, so he already knew that Esav's wives are worshiping Avodah Zarah. So you could understand that Esav is not so bad. But Yitzchak made as Esav in the children didn't prove that Esav is a Rasha. Maybe it's not Esav's fault. I cannot think mashpiyah. Maybe he couldn't help it, couldn't mashpiyah of them. So Mela, that's not such a raya that Esav is bad. But at least he had some hunch. Und wegen Esav allein hat gewusst, dass etwas mit ihm ist nicht im ganzen Tag. And even on Esav himself, he knew something is not straight with him, not smooth. In his Yiddishkeit, he says, in his Ruchnias, he could see it. Something. The word has the word epis, something in quotations. We don't know, he didn't know what, but something was there. Where do we see it? Because he said, we see by the brachas, when Esav came, after Yaakov, Esav came, but no, when first Yaakov came, and he said, what, how come he came so fast? So he said, Hashem made me get it fast. So he said, that's strange. Ein derech Esav liyashem shemayim shloga b'fiv. It's not the derech of Esav to have Hashem's name in his mouth. If he mentions Hashem's name, there's something. So we see here, he knew that something is with Esav. He doesn't mention Hashem. So the question was, why didn't Esav just tell me he's a Rosh? Especially that he already knew a little bit that Esav is not so. That's why we got Pesach Shad of Esav. Now, since Yitzchak already had a certain suspicion on Esav, but the he had a suspicion a little bit. The Eibishter could have told him the whole thing. As Esav is a Rosh, as Esav is a Rosh. He didn't have to command that the Eibishter should make the eyes of Yitzchak weak. So here we see how far we have to be careful from not speaking Lashon Hara. Yitzchak is given 57 years kol babayis. 57 years he was locked in his house. Unkemes. It's all for Rasha in Parashat Vayetze. And he's considered like dead for 57 years. All that could have been avoided by the Eibishter speaking Lashon Hara to Yitzchak. So he was always, Abim is only treten of Ayidin, Lashon Hara, not to speak an Ayidin Lashon Hara. And Esav is Ayid, because the Rebbe brings here from Nora 32. The Gemara in Dushin calls him a Yisrael Mumer. So he puts it in more, I feel like a Yisrael Mumer. He's a Yisrael Mumer. So now Yisrael Mumer, a Mumer is somebody who is against the Yiddishkeit. So someone would say, just can't speak Lashon Hara, but on Mumer, oh, you could speak like a lot of people say. Here we see Esav was a Yisrael Mumer. But because he was a Yisrael, the Eibishter didn't want to speak Lashon Hara. That's why the Eibishter didn't tell Yitzchak. So the Rebbe says the hero is Eibishayches to Esav. And he says, if the connection to Esav, it's like that. You be negate to Yidin noch Matan Teire. So when it comes to Yidin after Matan Teire, noch dem wie der Eibishter hat gesagt zu jeder Yidin und ich Havai Lekecha. After the Eibishter said, Aseret Adibra started off, I am God, your God, and he said it to every Yid. The Rebbe in Hayor 33 says, he said it Beloshen Yochid. Singular, he didn't say Anich Hashem Lekechem, because he wasn't speaking to Klal Yisrael only. He was speaking to every individual. Like it says in Medrash, every individual standing there felt that David was talking to him, and David was talking to him. So now that's after Matan Torah, and David spoke to every Yid saying, "I am your God." As by jeder Yidin is Anochi Havaya geworden Lekecha. By every Yid, Havaya, David Anochi Havaya became a Lekecha, which means ein Keach and Chayis, like it says in Shulchan Aruch. But Torah brings on that when you say Elokim, you have to think you're Keach and Chayis. So by a person like that, halachas kama v'kama, certainly you can't speak Lashon Hara. So here we see how strong it is, how much you have to be careful from not speaking Lashon Hara, even in such a situation. It's a very powerful hero. But the Sikh itself is just explaining the different pshatim of Rashi. That's to be a shorter Sikh. Okay, good to know.
Thank you very much.